If you want to support your fitness goals, health, and improve your performance with good nutrition, but you also care about animal welfare, sustainable food practices, and you don't want to spend a fortune on organic food, in this episode you will learn how to do it all. And it is much more simple than you might be thinking. Welcome to my podcast. My name is Daniel and I help you understand nutrition and how to easily apply it in your life, make better eating choices and how to stick with them so you can improve your performance, change your body composition and become your fittest. I have been working with people who are just starting out on their healthy lifestyle journey, but also with fitness coaches to help them apply the nutrition science into practice. Hi Andrew, nice to see you here.
Nice to see you. How you doing?
I'm awesome. Thank you for finding the time to join me today and speak about the personal health as well as the planet, which is I think a really interesting topic that I haven't discussed yet.
Yeah,
Ciao,
this is
Martin.
great. I'm excited to chat about it. It's on my mind a lot, so this will be great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, sure. So just to introduce yourself, I read about you some things, but my first contact with you was through the PN, Precision Nutrition course, and you really influenced me, I would say, in a nice and good way, that you expanded my view from like the nutrition only perspective, also like how food also has impact on our lives beyond the nutrition itself. So things like animal welfare, things like workers' welfare, and also the social aspects or sociological and so on, which I know that you have expanded on or upon in your latest book, Soul Planet. I haven't got my hands on it, but it's on my reading list. So maybe we could also talk about these things. And I've read about you that you have been like bodybuilder, you have volunteered for over like, if I remember, over 1,000 hours volunteering on sustainable farms and non-profit food recovery organizations. And yeah, as I mentioned, you have also been working with precision nutrition since 2007, which is quite a long time.
Yeah, I can speak to a couple of things there. So, when I think back on my life and nutrition and performance, I think of it kind of in chapters. So the first chapter was competitive bodybuilding,
Right.
and I had a really narrow perspective on food. It was all about how can this food optimize my body composition and performance, and that was it. And that was fine at the time. I had to be, I wanted to be the best bodybuilder I could, so I was really focused on that. But the next chapter was in my 20s when I started to go to school, learn more about overall health and the food system. And that's when my perspective started to widen a bit. And my gateway into thinking about this stuff was animal welfare. Mm-hmm. And that was my early 20s. And from there, I really made an effort to just try to widen my perspective as much as possible through reading the latest research, through spending time on farms and with food recovery organizations, and trying to widen that perspective. Because, like I said, when I was bodybuilding, it was very narrow, and that started to, I think, kind of gnaw at my soul a little bit. And I realized there was more out there that was bringing this food to my plate. And so I widened my perspective over the years, and I tried to bring a little bit of that in when I was doing a lot of writing and coaching with precision nutrition. I knew it wasn't the dominant focus of our coaching program or the company, but it seemed important enough to me to start to bring it in to the discussion a little bit.
I think it was a good choice because I believe that it, at least from my perspective, it differentiated the course from other that I have understood, because it was really different. Nobody ever mentioned this.
Oh, that's great to hear. Nice.
Yeah. So I think that many people actually, when they, like you mentioned, they care about their body, improving their body, maybe improving their health, fitness overall, they think about food as a food, some item that you find in a supermarket. And I think that you volunteered at these farms and you saw like how the food is grown, what's behind the scenes, basically all these processes, how animals are raised. And I think that this is something that's missing from the modern lifestyle currently. Of course, it depends from culture to culture, but people in the cities usually don't have that connection. They see, for example, meat in some plastic packaging or whatever. They don't make that connection that there was an animal, right? Or you see that plant, and I've seen like really scary statistics about people that they think, when they were asked, actually kids in school, where does potatoes come from, they had no idea. So maybe was that also the case for you, like volunteering on these animal farms, that, like you said, broadened your perspective, and maybe that was a really important step for you?
It was. I mean, in a lot of developed countries, we're very disconnected from where food comes from and how it's produced. Just not as many people in developed countries by the numbers are working in agriculture. So our first exposure to food is usually at the grocery store. And by that point, it's far removed from the processes of what happens on the farm, whether plant or animal food. And my theory at this point is that this disconnect from how food is produced is really one of the main reasons we have so many nutrition related problems. Because I think when we are more connected to food, we have a higher respect for food. Mm-hmm. And when we respect something, we're less likely to abuse it, whether that's throw the food away, overeat, undereat, not think about the choice we make at the grocery store, not go for tofu more often, not go for the pasture raised animal product more often, whatever it is. So I think if we can get more connected to food, whether that's volunteering on a farm, whether that's learning more about farm practices, I think that would go a long way to improving our health, because I think a byproduct of that is just going to be a higher respect for food.
Yeah, certainly. And now you just made me think when you mentioned that by maybe making that connection with food, how it is produced, we might not overeat as much, because I noticed, and also we mentioned it in some of the interviews that I've done before, like when people have that tendency to overeat or binge eat, right? It comes usually easy to you. I mean, the food is easily accessible to you. For example, peanut butter, right? But if you were to grow these peanuts, then process them, and then actually you have only the food that you produce, then I see how it possibly would affect the decision making, and not to overeat or not to binge eat on it.
Yeah, I mean, the
like
we should step back.
One of the mechanisms.
Right. Why we eat what we eat, it's massively, complex and shaped by all types of different things.
Right.
But I do think one big factor is this connection to how food is produced. And I think starting, growing a tomato on your porch or even something like that, mm-hmm. kind of gives you that it's a gateway into what goes into producing a food, and you are probably less likely to be careless with that food in any way. So I think that's a big thing moving forward.
So why is actually the food waste or not having that connection a big problem when we expand that perspective?
Yeah, wasted food. So that's one of the big things I talk about in Swole Planet. There's five main adjustments I talk about, and minimizing our food waste is one of those. And the thing with food waste, there's two big problems with it. Speaking ecologically, I guess you could say.
Hmm.
So one is it takes a lot of resources to grow food. It takes a lot of water, takes a lot of energy, takes a lot of chemicals in many cases, time, land, and when we throw food away, we essentially are throwing all the resources away that went into producing that food. So that's one big problem with food waste. It's just a waste of resources. And the other big problem is when we throw food away and it goes to the landfill, it breaks down and releases greenhouse gases. And it's not just a very small, trivial amount. It's an substantial amount. And it's one of the leading causes of climate change. So, I mean, those are the two big whammies when it comes to
Hmm.
wasted food. And people might hear that and think, okay, well, yeah, that sounds pretty bad, but we're probably not wasting that much food. No, we are. We're wasting about 1/3 of all food produced. So out of
Yeah.
all the food we produce, about a third is lost or wasted at some point, whether during transport, at the grocery store, at your house. So it's a really big deal in the world of sustainable food systems.
Mhm. So that's a big thing. And for me personally, like when I thought about this, when I saw these statistics, like 1/3 of the food is wasted. And then I made that connection, like, okay, specifically about animals, right? About meat. You produce meat, which is very energy intense and also requires a lot of water to produce. And then you kill that animal, and then you also have to in the end you throw it away, or let's say the third of that animal you throw it away. It makes me really sad about the food system as it is right now. So that's really something, um, yeah, that made me think about these things.
Yeah, and a whole other separate topic when I think about raising animals, but one of the big issues with raising animals for food that keeps me up at night is the inefficiency of it. In many cases, you have to put so much into raising the animal, so much feed, so much water, so much land, and you don't get that much beneficial stuff in the end. You get a little bit of meat or dairy or eggs or whatever the product is, but you had to put so much into getting it. So in many cases, it's really an inefficient use of resources. In some cases, it's possible to do it in a way where it's not as inefficient, but
Mhm.
in in many developed countries, how we raise animals, it's quite wasteful in many cases.
Right. So we definitely need to differentiate, like if it's like a developing country that is struggling with getting it or producing enough food for people or basically surviving, and a developed country that has a good food supply and is even overproducing or throwing away the food. So one of the things that I actually hear quite often from some people is that, well, we could be just, growing cows or goats or whatever animal, outside there, and it works together also with the land because they are fertilizing the land. And if we used this kind of farming practices, we would be perfectly fine. So what do you have on that topic?
Um, yeah, so it is possible to include animals in a sustainable agricultural system for sure. I actually have a hard time imagining a food system without any animals
Mm-hmm.
involved. I can't imagine how that would work. Um, I guess the thing that a lot of people don't understand is that the scale at which we are raising animals for food far outpaces what's sustainable. So, I mean, if I had a magic wand and said, all right, starting tomorrow, we are only going to raise animals in a way where it's truly sustainable. They're only going to use landscapes that aren't well suited for crops. They're only going to eat food scraps, and they're not going to be a burden to sustainability. If I had a magic wand and that happened tomorrow, we'd basically have to cut everything in half. Just about. That's the estimate. So we just couldn't produce the same amount of meat, dairy, and eggs. So I do think it is possible to have animal products in a sustainable food system. We just can't do it with the factory farming model. Factory farming, uh, the only thing factory farming is good for, if you want to say good, is keeping the price low for animal products and being efficient
Right.
with producing. That's it. It's not good for ecosystems. It's not good for workers. It's not good for animals. It's not good for antibiotic resistance. It's not good for zoonotic disease emergence. It's not good for surrounding communities. It's bad for a lot of things. So we really have to get away from that intensive factory farmed model and get back to that really more, I guess, traditional, slower paced agricultural model in many cases.
Yeah, so just one statistic that you have on your website is like that we slaughter 108 billion animals for food every 18 months, without not including fish, and that's nearly the same number of humans beings who has ever lived on the planet. So it's unimaginable.
Yeah, and
These
that's
are
yeah. So that's every 18 months, 108 billion animals, and the vast majority of those animals are chickens. That chicken factory farming has really skyrocketed over the past 40 years or so compared to other animal industries. So this is one of those cases where if we really want to encourage animal welfare, it obviously makes sense to eat fewer animal products, but sometimes switching over to animals that provide more meat per animal can result in fewer animals being killed. So a chicken is a smaller animal, it doesn't have that much meat. And so the number of chickens that have to be harmed and killed is just astronomical right now. So if we were
right.
able to maybe switch over to more um, meat from cows, for example, that could help to decrease the overall number of animals being killed. Again, it's I don't even like
Yeah.
talking about it because it sounds we're talking about animals' lives, and I'm reducing it down to numbers. But from when you're looking at the totality of animal suffering, that would probably be a useful thing in the long term.
Well, there is maybe another point of view, and I will play the devil's advocate here. That, for example, chickens is that with them they can be produced using less energy, right? And I think also that the food system and food industry as it is right now, it's very well set up for that kind of production, right? When it comes to meat or animal products. So basically, we have nearly perfected this system, as far as I know, and it allows us to be very efficient with it. But as you mentioned, it's not sustainable because we are reaching like the top of that system or what it can provide. So from the perspective of energy, from maybe if we even expand it and look at the nutrients that they provide, I think this would be also another thing to consider, like what is the value of nutrients that these animals have, because we, for example, nowadays usually buy just chicken breasts, right? Like typical bodybuilder meat, or people who care about their health, fitness, they want to lose weight, they prefer these pure or clean protein sources like chicken breasts. And so basically, there are some parts that get spared, or maybe chicken thighs that got thrown away in the end, like it's wasted because nobody buys it, or people don't really like to buy it, or So, is there actually maybe even a benefit by reducing that num or how much meat we eat from the nutrient perspective or from the health perspective?
Uh, yeah, a couple of thoughts. First off, yes, what you were saying in terms of one of the most sustainable things we can do is eat the entire animal. We tend to be a bit more picky with the parts of the animal we choose. So yeah, that can be helpful. I mean, in terms of a health benefit, pretty much, well, I don't know if I want to say that.
I didn't want to say
Health,
like, let's say that completely remove it, but if there is, for example, a benefit if in having like pasteurized animal, let's say when you compare it to some kind of, factory farmed animal.
oh, I see what
Could
you
be
mean.
could be one consideration, or basic, or maybe reducing the meat that we eat and substituting it with, let's say, more legumes that are much more sustainable.
Yeah, yes, those are good. Those are two good examples. So, switching from a factory farmed animal product to a pasture raised animal product would likely have benefits for our health. You could start to get really specific and say, well, it might have a better fatty acid profile,
Right.
or actually, probably fatty acids more than anything. Uh, that's true. I think probably the biggest health benefit for us switching from factory farm to pasture raised revolves around less likelihood of antibiotic resistant superbugs being a
Mm.
part of that animal. So I would say that's the biggest argument for switching to more of a pasture raised system. And then the second part of that, I mean, it's pretty clear at this point that your typical eater in a developed country who's eating about 7 or 8 ounces of meat on every day on average. If they were to decrease that and replace that with legumes, that would likely be in their best interest long term. It stacks the odds in their favor of fewer chronic diseases and better overall health in general. Just kind of that
Hmm.
swap for fewer animal products, more legumes. We don't. Most people aren't eating many legumes at all in developed countries. I mean, it's a very small part of our overall diet.
So just to share a statistic, because just yesterday I was writing article on vitamins and minerals in form of supplements, and I found this statistic that is from Slovakia, but it's actually relevant also to the Central Europe countries. Is the grams of meat consumed per person per day? It's about 200 grams here, red meat. So that's like 7 ounces, right? Um, grams of legumes per person per day is 4.6 grams, which is
It's like
nothing.
nothing. Yeah.
Yeah, and
It's one of the most, I mean, if there were one or two things, if there was one thing people could do that would really have a benefit for themselves, their own health, for animal welfare, for the farm workers working with animals, for a sustainable food system in terms of building better landscapes with sustainable soil and using less water, it's eating more legumes and fewer animal products. Just changing that ratio is one of the most powerful things we can do. And it's pretty easy because legumes are, they taste good and they're inexpensive and they fit into a lot of our cultural traditions. So they're a great thing to include.
yeah, I often discuss this that originally, like even in my childhood and in my parents' childhood, they ate a lot of, or relatively, lot of legumes, and we don't nowadays. Well, except for me, I eat them like daily. I'm actually bringing this or pulling these statistics up by eating about 300 grams a day, for example. But I know that not everybody does that. So, do you have maybe any favorite recipe when it comes to legumes, or favorite way of preparation? Something that people can enjoy?
Oh, I mean, so many. I mean, people have different tastes. My probably favorite way to utilize different legumes would be in, I like Mediterranean, Middle Eastern kind of food. So like falafel and hummus and that world, it's
Yeah,
easy to prepare. It tastes good. It's a nice addition. It's kind of familiar for some people. It's not too different or weird. And then a lot of Mexican and Spanish cuisine, black beans and burritos, burrito bowls, tacos, all that kind of stuff is those are probably my two favorite ways to incorporate legumes.
yeah, I agree. And also to my clients who I suggested preparing falafels, you can freeze them even. So it's a good for meal preparation ahead of time. And
Yep.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
What about some concerns that people have? Because I know that there is concerns when it comes to, for example, macronutrients. Because why we eat, I think, a lot of animal products besides taste is that it's an easy source of protein. And when we think from that perspective, there's just macro-friendly, quote unquote, meals that fit easily into macros, right? So chicken breasts, cottage cheese, fat-free yogurt, or whatever, easy sources of protein, right? But these plant-based sources like legumes, well, they have a lot of carbohydrates. So what do I do with that? What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on the world of macros. So, I mean, I first off, I appreciate and recognize that counting macros can be a useful thing for people in terms of making sense of food and kind of coming up with some parameters for how to put together meals. And I appreciate that. And I went through phases of my life where that was useful for me as well. But I will also challenge people a little bit that when we reduce food down to just macronutrients, I think that's kind of a disservice to the food because food offers so much more than macros.
Right.
I always like to compare it to if somebody were to say, well, yeah, the solar system is just basically planets and a sun and that's it. It's like, no, the solar system is much more complex than that. And I think of food the same way. So when I'm thinking about how to put together nutritious meals with plenty of protein that support body composition and performance, instead of worrying too much about the exact number of grams of something, try to put together meals that have a balance of different foods. So instead of having just like a bowl of cereal or a plate of pasta or a bowl of mixed nuts or something, those are all fine, but in and of themselves, they're not a kind of balanced, complete meal. So when you can come up with some really good go-to meals that check all the boxes for what you're trying to achieve, I think that can be a really useful thing. Instead of having to tally up your macros every day, you can say, all right, I have my 2 favorite breakfasts, my 3 favorite lunches, my 5 favorite dinners, and I know those meals are balanced and they'll provide my body with all the nutrients that it needs. So those are my main thoughts about macros. I mean, I guess another kind of tangent thought would be if somebody does find themselves not meeting their nutrient needs, you can always make up the difference with a supplement if you need to, for whatever reason. I don't think there's any harm in doing that.
Right. So maybe a different tangent on this is like I have had a client who used to count macros for like years. She was not making progress here. And we switched to taking photos of food. And she got away from counting macros and we are just looking at the food like on a plate. And if it looks pretty much good on the plate, it's usually also good for her and it also fits her macros. Many people are disconnected from this kind of idea or concept. Of course, we don't just throw whatever on the plate, right? We want like sources of protein, like sources of carbohydrates, and so on. But in this case, it promotes that kind of variety. So there's maybe like a different way how to look at it, and not to obsess over the macros, but like you said, you will have a variety of nutrients from different sources, like rainbow on the plate, like I like to say, and yeah, you will be more
Yeah,
satisfied with the meal.
yeah, I love that. And I mean, it also speaks to the importance of variety, like you said, and I, minimal processing. So I think where we start to get into problems too is if a food is highly, highly processed, then it can start to skew our nutrition, probably not always for the best. So, I mean, if somebody is eating a variety of minimally processed foods, if you add up all the nutrients they're getting, it's probably going to be a fairly balanced nutrient intake for the day. I
Yeah,
mean, if again, that can fall apart if it's they're only eating two foods, if they eat apples and peaches all day and that's it. Yeah, that's not going to be a balanced nutrient intake at the end of the day. So variety is good. Minimally processed is also pretty helpful when you're trying to kind of ease out of obsessing about macros so much.
right. And now just thinking about it, it makes me see that people who have problems also um, following their goals is that, or hitting their macros is like they are trying to feed these specific foods into it. Like I will have rice, I will have chicken breasts and broccoli, and they don't have that variety. Then they eventually fall off the track. Most people, well, some people can adhere to it very well, but yeah, they are creating micronutrient deficiencies and other deficiencies that we might not know about. So yes, that's when we take a step back and look at the whole picture. I think that there's a good thing not to think about macros only. And it's good
Yeah.
for the planet as well.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So maybe somebody who is new to the idea of vegan diet, but I would like to mention we are not speaking about here about vegan diets only, or specifically we are speaking about that a good diet that can fulfill, let's say, your macronutrient, like nutritional needs, but also is healthy for the planet, doesn't necessarily need to exclude all the animal products. And it depends on your circumstances, on your knowledge, and variety of other reasons, right? But I think there is a big push nowadays also for the vegan diet. We have seen like based on the statistics that I've seen, it's been skyrocketing in the Western world. I don't know if these people will be able to sustain it or no, but I think it's pretty good to do it. But with that, we also see companies producing a lot of vegan food to feed the market. And I don't think that it's always good. Just because it's vegan, it doesn't necessarily need to be good. And I know that you have also mentioned in your book, based on your description, that you have some thoughts about like healthfulness or maybe pros and cons of the vegan diet. So what are your thoughts, or what are you covering in your book about on this topic?
I really, I mean, I have a soft spot or a fondness for vegan eaters and vegan diets. I think people going down that path often have the best intentions in terms of helping animals and trying to make the world a better place. So I really appreciate what they're doing. And for, I mean, a pretty big part of my life, I was eating what I would call an exclusively vegan diet.
Mm-hmm.
And that's changed a little bit, just a little bit, as I've kind of evolved in some of my other thinking. But in terms of the pros and cons, I think there's a lot I get into. But when you when you're really trying to eat in a sustainable way and considering the workers along with the animals, along with ecosystems, and thinking about things like wasted food and how can I best support local farmers and how can I best minimize plastic packaging with food? How can I not overeat a lot of highly processed foods, like you were saying? Um, then it can be a little bit more tricky to be a 100% vegan eater because sometimes your goal of being a vegan eater will kind of conflict with some of those other things you're trying to do. And I know in my life, where I live in the United States, uh, I'm in an area where during the winter months uh, there's not a lot of fresh vegetables and fruits. So it would be easier here to probably rely on pastured dairy in some cases or something like that if I wanted to support local farmers.
Hmm.
Um, and like you said too, oftentimes when I go to a grocery store, I have no problem now, especially the last couple of years, finding uh, vegan foods, but a lot of them now are really highly processed with a lot of other added salt and sugar and oil and stuff like that. And that's fine. I eat those occasionally, but it can kind of squeeze out some of the minimally processed foods. And I
Hmm.
think just in some of these cases, it can start to be like you look at your diet and you say, well, yeah, I'm eating a vegan diet, but now I am eating a lot more vegan processed food. I am getting a lot of food with plastic packaging. I'm getting food shipped in from far away in some cases. And so I think then it might be challenging for somebody to really stick with that in those cases. That's more of like big picture challenges.
Hmm.
I also, more zooming in on somebody, I also think there are challenges related to um, getting certain nutrients. So some people don't seem to convert carotenoids into active vitamin A in the body very well. Some people don't convert the plant form of omega-3 into DHA very well. Some people might have a gut situation that doesn't produce vitamin K2 very well. So there are different specific nutrients for people where they might do fine on a vegan diet or they might not do so well on a vegan diet. And I try to remind people that's okay. Like, you don't have to completely abandon it and go back to eating animal products all the time. Making small adjustments and being really strategic with a minimal amount of animal products can help somebody eat mostly plant-based still.
Good. So, what do you think? Like, where is the food industry going in the next few years?
Oh.
What direction is it developing?
Um, hmm.
For example,
I
I
wish I
see.
could. Go
Yeah, go
ahead.
on.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I see. For example, a lot of great innovations. For example, this food that is factory made from like I think it was Beyond Meat or some other product that basically is like cloned meat or I can find the
Yeah.
words right now. So I think that could be potentially a great innovation. But then also fungi and bacteria made food. So something along the lines of fermented food. So how I think that in a matter of let's say 10 years, I can see it possible that there will be or it will be quite normal for us to purchase food that has been produced by bacteria or by fungi or some kind of or in that way. I mean,
Yeah. Uh, yeah. So on those points, I mean, plant-based meat, so things like uh, Beyond Burgers and the Impossible Burger. So those are the meats that started off as lentils and potatoes and wheat, and they were processed, and now they resemble like a burger or a sausage or something. Those have really grown, and I think it's a really nice option for people to have because we think about putting together meals with burgers and sausage and so it's normal for a lot of people to do that. And so to go completely from that to just plates of like lentil curry and falafel and stuff like that can be a little bit intimidating. So it's a nice option for people to have if they say I'm going to go
right.
do a plant-based burger or plant-based sausage. That's great. um, I mean, do I think building your diet around that is a great idea for health? Probably not. Do I think it's going to solve all of our food system problems? Definitely not. But it's going from the absolute worst, which is eating a lot of factory farmed meat to a little bit better, which is now getting meat from plant-based sources, even if they were maybe not grown in the most sustainable way. The other part, you mentioned cultured meat or clean meat. So it's
Mm-hmm.
meat grown from the cells of an animal. Um, I think we're a couple years off from seeing that more available. Um, I've seen mixed results. Some early estimates say it's going to be extremely helpful and extremely ecologically friendly and widely affordable and available. And I've seen other estimates that say it's never going to be affordable for most people. It's still going to lead to a certain number of animals suffering to get the cells, and so I've seen some mixed things with that. I think overall it might be helpful, the cultured meat idea, but I'm not 100% sure. Um, and then, like you mentioned, a couple other food technologies. There's a lot of hope for, I think, technology helping us do things in a more sustainable way. I hope we don't lose sight, though, of some of the really presently available options we have to
Mm-hmm.
do things more sustainably. We talked earlier about eating more legumes. We can do that right now. We don't have to
Yeah.
wait for technology. We can do it now. It tastes good. It's inexpensive, and a lot of people can access legumes. So it'll be balanced. I don't know if I'm really hopeful for the next few years of the food system and the food industry, but maybe.
Mm-hmm. So, what would be your closing statement? Like, what can we do on a personal level? Because I have that feeling, and correct me if I'm wrong. Like, we have a personal power. What we do, we have certain amount of power in our choices, and by making our choices on a personal level, we are also affecting the higher levels, like food production system. As we know, what we purchase is what is being produced more, right? Producers will not produce what people don't want to buy in the end. So yeah, what's in our personal power to eat for health, for performance, and for also planetary health?
Yeah, I mean, we are powerful. I mean, we people make up systems, and so if people change, systems can change. So I do think there is a lot of power in what we buy and eat. And I think we're at a unique time where if we wait for top down policies to make all of this really easy, I think we're going to be waiting too long and it'll be too late. So, on the one hand, yes, I do think whatever you can do, make that change. With all that said, I know a lot of people feel quite burdened with that, and they say, "Don't, it can't be up to me. I already have to worry about feeding my kids and my dog and myself and like my budget and my time." I get that. So if somebody just feels overwhelmed and like they're already shouldering a lot of the burden, um, then try to make changes however you can, whether that's if you can make a suggestion at your office for like what snacks they keep in the fridge, or at your kids' school for what they serve in the cafeteria, or you can write a letter to your local politician for having a better policy in place for what foods they keep at the grocery store, for if they use plastic bags during checkout or something like that. So however, if you feel like it's too much for your own eating, that's fine. Look at maybe other ways in your immediate circle that you can help to make some changes, because we definitely need as many people on board with this stuff as we possibly can right now.
Right. And when you mentioned like your personal burden, and some people, I think, see it a big obstacle from eating, let's say, healthier, or they think about, well, I need to eat all those exotic foods, but then they have that counterpoint, like, but exotic food is coming here from several thousand kilometers across the world, so there is this ecological burden, and that makes them more confused or hesitant or whatever. It's really a big obstacle. So from my perspective, legumes are a good choice once again. And eating locally produced vegetables if possible. Sometimes it is mentioned like within 100 miles or something like that. So supporting local farms and usually purchasing most of these products, at least here, I would say, is even cheaper than buying all these exotic foods and meat and whatever else.
I love that. And yeah, if people are looking for really boiled down, like what are the 3 or 5 things I can do? I love what you're saying, and that's exactly what I get into in Soul Planet. So I can leave you with the big 5 that I recommend. Find your minimal effective dose of animal products. So we've talked a little bit about that. Mm-hmm. Minimize wasted food. We talked a little bit about that. Support sustainable farms. Bonus if it's a local farm. Even if it's a sustainable farm far away, I think that's okay. Eat a wider variety of minimally processed foods and minimize single-use plastics. If we could all incorporate those 5 in our lives, at our place of business, at our schools, and get our politicians to make policies that make it easier to do those things, I think we'd have a good chance at a sustainable food future.
And I think the key point here is to minimize. So not to strive for perfection, but to minimize. Do a little bit less of that instead of trying to absolutely remove it from day to day.
Yeah, everybody's coming at it from a different starting point. So it allows a little bit of wiggle room.
Great. So Andrew, thank you very much for your time and for sharing all these things with me. Where can people get your book, or how can they connect with you?
Yeah, my website, ryandandrews.com. They can check that out. And there's more information about the book there. And if you have any questions or concerns, shoot me an email. If you're a teacher or a student or a farmer or working at a nonprofit, shoot me an email. I'll give you a nice discount as well.
Awesome. So also these links will be in the show notes if people are listening to it in form of podcast. And yeah, I will include all of these. Once again, thank you very much and have a great day. I hope that you enjoyed this episode, and before you leave, it would be awesome if you could leave a rating and a review on the platform or an application that you use for listening. It will help me greatly to bring new guests and discuss topics you are interested in. By the way, check the show notes for important links, maybe that we discussed during the episode and all the other, and subscribe to Health, Energy, Performance newsletter, where I share at least one tip about nutrition, training, and mindset that will help you reach your health and fitness goals easily. I would also like to invite you to have a strategy call with me. During this 30 minutes call, we will first dive into your goals. I will get to know you, your lifestyle, and you will get a clear direction and know exactly what to do next to progress your training and maybe improve your eating habits. I started this as a personal challenge for my 30th birthday, and I fell in love with it. I really loved connecting with people and helping them solve their issues and problems during these strategic calls, so naturally I continue doing so. Mind you, this is not a sales call, but you must be ready to invest your energy and time to get the benefit. So check the show notes, sign up for the call, and I will be looking forward to hear from you.